All right, this is a short review on integers, on addition and subtraction rules of integers. To review what integers are whole numbers and their opposites. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, so on and so forth. And their opposites, -1, -2, -3, -4. So we should talk about that word opposites. The opposite of -4 is +4. That means they're the same distance from 0, but they're on the opposite side. So -4 is 4 left of 0, +4 is 4 right of 0. The opposite of +7 is -7. Those are also called additive inverses. They're called additive inverses because if you were to add them together, you end up being at 0. Because this is like 7 steps to the right and 7 steps to the left. They cancel each other out and you're right back at 0. Another concept that we should talk about is absolute value. Absolute value is shown by putting bars around something like this. These are the absolute value bars. What that means is we want to know that number's distance from 0. So we always express it as a positive. I always use the example, you can be 5 foot to my left or 5 foot to my right or 5 foot in front of me or 5 foot behind me or above me or below me, but you can't be -5 foot away from me. You can be 5 foot in any of those directions, but you can't be -5 away. So when I talk about 5, how far is 5 from 0? Well, it's 5 jumps away from 0. How far is -5 from 0? It's 5 jumps away from 0. So 5 and -5 have the same absolute value, which is 5. So what's the absolute value of 9? 9. By the way, that's written like this. The absolute value of 9 is 9. What's the absolute value of -2? The absolute value of -2 is +2. Because if you notice, it's always expressed as a positive because you can't be a negative distance away from something. You can be 2 to the left, 2 to the right, 2 above, 2 below, 2 in front, 2 in back, but you can't be -2 away. We'll be using that absolute value concept as we deal with adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing of integers, because we actually don't add, subtract, multiply, and divide negatives. We do all of the work with their absolute value, their positive value. Here's a quick review on the addition rules. I put down here the question that I ask my kids all the time, do the signs match? Because when we get to multiplication and division rules, there will be a different question you're asking yourself there. So right here, we want to look at whether they match or not, the signs, that is. So you have two different rules, whether they have the same sign or different signs. If they have the same sign, that means they're on the same team. So basically, you add and use that same sign. I always think about it like a war. If I had 7 on team positive and 3 on team positive and they meet up, they're not going to fight each other. We add their absolute values, and then we use that same sign. They're both positive, so my answer is positive. When this -10 and this -4 meet up, well, they're also on the same team. They're on team negative. They're not going to fight each other, so we add their absolute value. So my problem I'm actually doing is 10 plus 4 in my head. I'm getting 14, and then I use the sign that they are. They're on team negative. Now here's some examples of what it looks like on a number line. Here's the first one. If I had 7, that would be like this. And then I add 3 positives to it. We get over to +10. Here's the second problem. I have -10. I add to it a -4. And we end up over here at -14. See, they're on the same team, so they're headed the same direction. Next one is -3 plus -6. They're on the same team. They're all on team negative, so I add 3 plus 6 and get 9. And then I put my negative, the sign that they match at. Another way of showing that is I could show you -3. There's 3 negatives, and then they meet up with these 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 negatives. None of them fight each other. They're all on team negative, so if you count them up, you have 9 negatives. Same thing for 5 plus 9. They're on the same team, so we add them. 5 plus 9 is 14, and we use that same sign, which is positive. We just don't need to write the positive, and we could draw that out also, but I don't want to take the time to draw out 14 positives. So we'll go on to the next side over here, which is if they have different signs. If they have different signs, then we take their absolute value and we subtract them because they're fighting each other, and we use the sign of the larger absolute value. So let me show you that. The first one, -5 and +12. Well, let me show you what -5 would look like on the number line. -5. +12 from there would be 5, 10, 11, 12. Notice this range right in here, these 5 steps left are canceled out by these 5 step right. So we're going to end up taking 17 steps on this problem, but it won't look like we took 17 steps, because where did we end up? We ended up at positive 7. They have different signs, so in my head I do the problem 12 minus 5, which is 7, and then I use the sign of the larger. Since 12 has a larger absolute value than negative 5, I use that sign, and my answer is positive 7. Next one I'll show with the positives and negatives. So I have a 9 that meets up with a negative 5. So here's my 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 positives meet up with 5 negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, when they get together, they fight. So these two kill each other off, and these two kill each other off, and these two kill each other off. And we have all these little skirmishes. All of these die. And you can see why the larger absolute value wins. Since there were more on team positive, the positives win it by 4. If I go back and do that just with the rule, I'm thinking, okay, well 9, I'm thinking the 9 and the 5 fight each other, so I subtract them. I'm using their absolute values. I get 4, and then I look back and say, oh, 9 has a bigger absolute value, so I use the positive that goes with that, and it's positive 4. Next one I'll show with the number line. So negative 8 would look like this. And then you go 13 positive. So there's 8 positive, and there's 13 positive, landing at positive 5. So again, subtract their absolute values. 13 minus 8 is 5. And then I look back at them and say, oh, the positives were bigger this time, so we have a positive answer of 5. Negative 16 plus 7, they're fighting. Why? Because once again, we have a negative and a positive. They don't get along, so we subtract them. I'm using their absolute values again. I get 9, and then I look back, and since the negative has a larger absolute value, I use that sign. My answer is negative 9. Now I'm going to do the middle set, and I have a question mark because now we have to actually decide what they are. So look at the first problem. 8 plus negative 11. Go back to your question. Do the signs match? The answer is no. They're on different teams. So we subtract them. 11 minus 8 is 3, and who wins? The negatives win it because the negative have a bigger positive or bigger absolute value. The second one, do the signs match? Yes, they do match this time. So we add them. 7 plus 12 is 19, and they're all on team negative. The third one, do they match? Yes, they do match. So once again, we add 6 plus 8 and get 14, and then we're telling you what team they're on. They're all on team negative. The last one, do they match? No, they don't match. So they fight. 25 minus 7 is 18. And who wins this time? The positive is bigger, so our answer is positive 18. All right, one of the more difficult things for kids to understand is subtraction rule. What we do at our school is we just change subtraction, leave, change opposite. As you get older, you'll learn how to do this as a subtraction problem, but we really want you to recognize subtraction as adding of the opposite, okay? And so I'm going to change each one of these problems as I go. The first problem says 6 minus negative 10. So I leave the first part alone. I change the minus to plus, and the opposite of negative 10 is positive 10. Then I analyze it like we did earlier. They're on the same team, so I add, and I use that same sign since they're all on team positive. Next one, I leave the negative 7. I change it to plus, and I go to the opposite of negative 3, which is positive 3. Now I analyze it. They're not on the same team, so I subtract them. They fight each other, and the negatives win it by 4. Next one, leave the negative 7, change, go to the opposite of positive 5. Now they're on the same team, so I add 7 and 5 to get 12, and then I remind myself they're all on team negative. 13 minus negative 7, I leave, change, opposite. They end up on the same team then. They're both on team positive, so I add and use that same sign. Do a couple more. Leave, change, opposite. They end up on the same team then. So I add them, and then I use that sign that they're on. They're all on team negative. Next one, leave, change, opposite. They end up on the same team, so I add and use that same sign. They're all on team positive. Leave, change, opposite. They fight because they're on different teams. There are 3 survivors that are all on team negative. Why? Because remember, team negative ends up with more. Last one, leave, change, opposite, which puts them both on team positive. They have the same sign, so I add and use that same sign.